do we have any questions for either Tom or Steve? Ma'am, in the purple, what's your question?
I have one for the doctor. Please tell me that med gap, is that what you said?
Med
cap is not a lifetime appointment.
That's a good question. I'll have to look into that for you. I don't know. I know it's a presidential appointment. It's not subject to approval by Congress. I do not know if it's a lifetime appointment.
We have some questions from this side? Yes, sir.
Dr. Kagan, you mentioned that no amount of government spending can replace a healthy doctor-patient relationship. You talked about the money in taxes. How will the doctor-patient relationship especially be affected by Obamacare?
Good question. So the answer is complicated because it depends on what you are recommending. For instance, if a patient comes in with an abdominal aortic aneurysm, something I treat frequently, and the recommended treatment is a certain type of repair for that aneurysm, and the Independent Medicare Advisory Commission has determined that there are 3 or 4 accepted therapies for that condition, and you are over 65, Medicare will cover it. However, not everyone falls into that same category. And if you or if I propose a treatment for you that perhaps is accepted as a standard treatment for your problem, but it is not approved by the Independent Medicare Advisory Commission, you may find that your reimbursement for that is not covered. So now you're in a conundrum because there is a very fine line between what is FDA approved and what is standard of care. The FDA approves certain medical devices by testing for certain procedures. However, that doesn't always apply to what the standard of care is, which is what a doctor with similar training and experience would do under similar circumstances. I'll give you an example. A lot of stents on the market now that we put in arteries every day of the week, every month of the year, thousands and thousands of these stents go in. A lot of them are not FDA approved for those particular indications. However, the standard of care would dictate that that is the appropriate treatment. And this is one of the disconnects you're going to get. If the Medical Advisory Commission doesn't recognize your proposed therapy as an accepted therapy, although it may be a perfectly reasonable therapy, they may not pay for it. And that's going to create a problem because I won't be able to do what I'm recommending to you. And that puts me in a tough situation because either A, I perform a procedure that I don't think is needed or necessary, or B, I send you someone else. So you're taking away that relationship that is so key to treating patients. Hope that answers your question.
Yes.
Well, that actually sort of brings me back to yesterday's arguments, and I'm curious about Tom's observations on this front. We seem to hear a lot from Justice Ginsburg, when she was talking about the vast number of uninsured driving up the cost of health care. Do you think that those kinds of policy concerns will drive all of the justices? Just your predictions on that, your mind readings, yeah.
How many of y'all have read the C.S. Lewis Space Trilogy? Anyone read that? I encourage you to read that. And one of the themes of that is that the modern emphasis on intellect over a God-centered view of the world. And if you are a very smart person, you have deep intellect, you can come up with a logical explanation for anything that you want to justify. And so, as I said before, I just think there's going to be a strong prejudice on behalf of 4 of those justices to try to come up with some rationale to uphold the statute. I don't know that I agree with the premise that uninsured people are the prime reason why medical costs have gone up. I don't know that. I think that's something that needs to be discussed at greater length, and not an assumption that I would take at face value. But if you want to come up with a logic for supporting taking away an individual's freedom to make a contract with whoever he wants to, I suppose that's one of the things you can come up with.
Do you think that the conservative justices will be just as likely to consider pragmatic as well as policy considerations, or, because you mentioned it twice, that we see that from the liberal wing. Do you expect that same kind of reasoning from the conservative one?
Well, you know, I had a great dad, and they always just said about my dad, you know, his biggest weakness is such a nice guy. So that was a good weakness to have, to be a nice person. So how does this relate to your question? We have a lot of justices who are conservative justices who believe in the concept of judicial restraint. And they don't think that they should be policymakers, that policy ought to be made by Congress. And they don't like, and this is good, this is a good quality for them. And they don't like to get into areas where they're declaring a statute unconstitutional unless there's a really good basis for it. That's their natural inclination. I just hope that they'll conclude that there is a really good basis for finding this one unconstitutional.
All right, I completely concur. More questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
I've got a question to the doctor. What do you see as the future of the medical profession? From what I could infer from the comments, if this law goes forward, that you become a national medical corps.
So the question is, are we going to be forced to do that, or
do you see that as a potential outcome as a national medical corps?
Yes, and you're seeing it now. Look at our Wake County. You've seen the Rex and Wake thing play out in the paper. What you may or may not know is that Wake Heart and Vascular Associates, one of the biggest cardiovascular practices in the county, was recently aligned with UNC Healthcare. In response to that, Wake Med bought the practices of Carolina Cardiology, Cary Cardiology, and one other group, Raleigh Cardiology, because the physicians felt that on their own they were not going to be able to negotiate good contractual relationships with insurers. But by partnering with hospitals, they have more bargaining power. I think that that is probably the beginning of what you're hinting at, which is the coalescence of these practices into hospital and physician associations. That's not necessarily bad or good, because we're probably headed to a global payment system. One of the experimental demonstration projects in this law is to, rather than paying physicians and hospitals separately, is to give a bundled payment to the entity of the hospital and the physician, the accountable care organization, and let them divvy it up. And that concerns me because, you know, we're in small business. I mean, I have 4 partners. We employ 16 people. We are a small business in every sense of the word. We make our own decisions. We have board meetings. We decide what equipment to purchase, how to run our practice. You know, you take that away, and now you've sort of taken away that part of it. If I want to take a half a day off, I can take a half a day off. I know friends who are employed by the hospital. If they leave, you know, half an hour early to go to their kids' play, somebody reports them. You left a half an hour early. It becomes an employee-employer relationship. And that's not why I went into medicine. I know it sounds hokey. I went into medicine to take care of patients. I shut the door. It's a one-on-one conversation. I give them my best recommendation based on my knowledge, based on my training, based on my experience. And I feel that if you interfere with that, if I have a hospital looking over me, well, you can't do that one, that's a little too expensive, then you've taken away what we have to preserve.
Yeah, I would like to comment on that. I don't know about the rest of you, but I was thoroughly impressed with Bill's presentation. And if I need a surgeon, I'm going to be calling you. But let me ask you this without wishing to denigrate the medical profession. If the government is paying all the money, and if the government decides what the procedures are, who do you think the doctors are going to have to listen to when they're making decisions, as compared to a system where the patients are paying the money and the patients have got some control over how the doctor is getting paid or how much they're getting paid? Just think about that for a second. I mean, this has huge implications for the evisceration of our freedom of choice and control of our own lives. And the more the government gets involved, the more we head towards the road of circle.
May I ask a question? It seems to me that years ago, what you're talking about existed. You had big state general hospitals and the big state psychiatric hospitals. And that was always proven to be ineffective. So now they're reversing and going back to that same thing, only bigger.
Essentially, yes. I don't know if you know, I lived in Philadelphia at the time, the Allegheny system, where what they did is exactly what you're talking about. They bought up a lot of these local practices and started paying everybody salaries, hoping that all of these practices would feed the surgical cases, which is really what drives the hospital, is surgery. And hospitals don't make money unless surgeons are doing operations. And what happened was everybody went into slowdown mode. Internists started working 8 to 5, started seeing 2 or 3 patients an hour. There was no incentive to see more, and the whole Allegheny system collapsed. This happened with Rex and Wake years ago. They bought up practices as well. You probably remember going through that phase. That was a little bit prior to my arrival in 2003 from Philadelphia. And a lot of those physician practices ended up buying their practices back from the hospital. One example was Raleigh Adult Medicine, a group of excellent physicians that practices near Rex. They ended up getting sold. They hated it so much. They lost so much independence. They bought their practice back from Rex Hospital. So yes, we're reinventing the wheel. Those who don't remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Santa Ana, it makes full circle. Interesting, one more thing I'll throw out there. What I did, I didn't know it was going to come up, but I think it is helpful. I just pulled 3 surgical codes as an example, just to give you an idea of what we receive in payment for those particular surgical procedures from both Blue Cross Blue Shield, from both Medicare and Medicaid. Now, I can't give you the exact numbers because it's a contractual obligation, but let me just give you a feel for it. So a commonly performed surgical procedure in the United States by a vascular surgeon is carotid surgery. Fix the blockage in the carotid artery. Some of you may have had that procedure or certainly know somebody who's had it done. On average, Blue Cross Blue Shield pays about $1,500 for that operation. Right? Medicare pays a little over $1,000. Medicaid pays about $800. So almost half of what I get, same risk, the same office staff, everything that I have to do for that Blue Cross Blue Shield patient, I have to do for the Medicaid patient. Yet, to pay my staff and to run my office and pay my rent, I'm getting almost half of what I would. So, I'm a nice guy. I see Medicaid. I don't necessarily like it. It's about maybe 10 or 15% of what I do. I'm happy to do it for the privilege of being a physician. But if you expand Medicaid, and I'm seeing more and more patients who I can't even afford to pay my bills, let alone make any money, we're going to drop it. And then those patients are going to, I hate to say it, end up in the emergency room. And so by expanding the Medicaid level to now you're going to give subsidies to people, families of 4 times the poverty level. The poverty level right now in this law, the federal poverty level for a family of 4 is $22,500. You're going to expand Medicaid to include 133% of that poverty level. So now any family of 4 making up to $29,327 is going to be on Medicaid. In addition to that, if you make up to 400% of Medicaid, which is $90,000 for a family of 4, that family is still going to be eligible for a supplement. The law explicitly states that individuals and families who make between 100 and 400% of the federal poverty level, the FPL, which is currently $22,500, and want to purchase their own health insurance on an exchange are eligible for subsidies. I remember when I was a resident, I had 2 kids, I was working 150 hours a week, I made $27,000. I'd be on Medicaid.
Yeah.
I would be eligible for full Medicaid.
Well, on that frightening note, Steve, we've got another question over here.
I'm a primary care doc, and for 10 years was a managing doc for a 30-physician group. I have a question that's kind of related to this whole conflict of where we are in our healthcare system. And one is, our system right now in healthcare doesn't really utilize market forces, and both within the state and then between the states. And I wonder whether there's any legal or medical push to do that. And so for example, what I mean is, in our group, we could do CAT scans, and we could do them for about 1/3 of what the market rate was, but nobody else could send patients to me because you were going from one tax ID to another. We weren't a freestanding facility. There's certificate of need rules within North Carolina. So even though we could, anyway, we could have a machine way underutilized, still operated at a fraction of the market cost, and still actually do okay with that. And I wonder why we don't use more market forces within the state. And then my brother-in-law moved from Atlanta up here, and Yes, he was with Kaiser when Kaiser was in North Carolina, and they gave him the option of having a cheaper state-based premium if he stayed with his group in Georgia versus if he changed to Kaiser in North Carolina, even though he'd be seeing the same group of doctors. So I wonder, why, if we're going to go through some national plan, why isn't there more state-to-state competition to use market forces to control healthcare costs and improve quality like there is in every other industry?
Well,
I can't tackle that.
I should, since Bill won't, I'll say something. First of all, we've got this Commerce Clause problem about
Between the states.
between the federal government and the people. Look at I was going to read the Declaration of Independence. Read that today. Think to yourself, if the founders would have thought that some of the stuff that they protested against for King George is going on in the United States right now. And so we've had this expansion of the federal government into everything, almost all areas of life, and it's been justified under the Commerce Clause, and it's been justified under some logic, but this is for the, the common good of everyone. Most of these things are actually concealed wealth transfer programs. And I just go back to Ludwig von Mises, who's a very famous economist, and he basically says every time the government gets involved in the marketplace, it's a disaster. So we have to have a sea change about our fundamental values, individual responsibility, encouraging responsible behavior. I'd like for Bill to comment. He was telling me earlier, does this Obamacare encourage people to engage in good, healthy behavior so they won't have health expenses, or does it just, what does it do in that regard? So this is a good example of kind of just the global problem we've got with this problem, which is extremely complicated.
So let me try to answer your question first, and then I'll answer the next question. So the first question is, and you may or may not know this, often some of you will, is that when it comes to market forces, when we apply to accept Medicare or Medicaid patients, it's basically take it or leave it. And if you decide not to participate in Medicare, you are not allowed back in for 2 years. The flip side of that, with private insurers, United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, we sit down with them. We look at the most commonly performed procedure codes. We show them that we're all board certified in vascular surgery. We all have met quality assurance data, and we market ourselves to them. And in return for that, we develop a contract to provide services. And we have a contract for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, we look at it again. Are we providing that service? Are your clients pleased with that service? If so, we'll renew. Market force is certainly in place. I'm not ashamed to tell you that we had that same discussion with United Healthcare a few years ago and said, forget you. We did not accept United Healthcare for 3 years until finally they realized that we were, again, I don't mean to be arrogant, we are the preeminent vascular group in Wake County. And they finally came back to us and we negotiated because the market dictated that their patients needed vascular care. And so after 3 years, they came back with a better offer. And so that's the answer to the market. But again, Medicare and Medicaid, take it or leave it. If you decide not to take it, you're out for 2 years. You can't get back in. So you're punished. You don't have the power to negotiate. So the second question is, sorry, just to follow up on the healthy behavior aspect of things. It's unclear from reading the law if you will be, quote, rewarded, end quote, for healthy behavior. What's interesting about the law is it does limit the amount you can charge someone more for unhealthy behavior. The law states, and I'll quote it to you, you can increase someone's premium for only 4 reasons. Reason number 1 is if they're an individual or a family, not a surprise. Reason number 2 is the rating area. The government determines based on where you live whether that is generally a sicker or healthier area of the country, and it assigns a rating area to it. The only other 2 reasons you can raise someone's premium is either if they smoke or if based on their age. If someone's obese, if they have uncontrolled diabetes from their obesity, if they have some other modifiable risk factor which they choose to ignore, you cannot charge them more. We all know that there are numerous conditions that can be prevented that unnecessarily raise healthcare costs. Yet according to this law, the way it's written right now, you're not allowed to charge anybody anything more. As a matter of fact, you're limited on a smoker. You can only charge them 1.5 times what you charge a non-smoker. I can tell you from personal experience that smokers incur a lot more costs than 1.5 times of a non-smoker. So you're already being limited in terms of what you can do. Because now you can't exclude people. You have to take everybody, no pre-existing conditions, no lifetime limits on benefits, and now you're not even allowed to charge them even a proportionally higher amount for behaviors that you know lead to higher healthcare costs. So you're stuck with the market the way it is. I wish I had a better answer for you. In the private market, there is some market force. In the Medicare, Medicaid market, take it or leave it.
I'd like to chime in briefly on the question of market forces. Not only is the market affected by insurance, but we're artificially constricting the supply. And you mentioned certificate of needs. How many of you in the room know what a certificate of need is? Very impressed. For those of you who don't, before a hospital can add beds or before a medical practice can add any type of major piece of equipment like an MRI machine, they have to get permission from the government to buy it. They have to demonstrate that there is a need for that equipment. As a consequence, we have fewer beds in hospitals. We have fewer pieces of, the laser machines that zap kidney stones and things like that. Those are all the sorts of things that government is suppressing the supply of. So while I thoroughly respect Tom and Steve's remarks on the insurance aspect, I think it's also important to remember that the market forces are excluded from the provision of health services, not just in the context of insurance, but in the context of constriction of supply of hard equipment. So,
I was going to say, just one other comment. If the government can't run the post office, they can't run a retirement system. Why do we think we want to turn over the largest part of our economy to the government to run? It makes no sense to me. And I also wanted to mention sort of that, I don't know if you know the Heritage Foundation, but it's a foundation in D.C. and they have got a lot of people a lot smarter than me who've been looking at this healthcare issue for a long time. And they've got a whole webpage about free market-oriented systems where the patients have more control over the health care they get, that they're trying to put out there as an alternative to Obamacare if it's struck down or if the next Congress repeals it. So that'd be a good place. If you're interested in that topic, I think there's no better place to look about more market-oriented solutions than at the Heritage Foundation sort of page.
Great, I think we have time for one more quick question and quick responses. You guys have been a very active table over there.
If I understood the doctor, there's a section in the law, I believe under the MedPAC area, future proposed changes to the Congress regarding this Obamacare. If I understood you correctly, it said that the debate on that would be limited to a certain specific time.
Correct.
So I guess my question is really to Tom, since he's the lawyer.
Yes, sir.
Is that not an infringement of the First Amendment? Is there not constitutional questions involved as far as that part of the law itself?
I'm sorry, Dave. I got a text from a client. So could you repeat the first part of the question?
The doctor said that there's a section in the MedPAC portion of this Obamacare.
Right.
Future proposed changes to Congress regarding this would be limited, I forget the length of time.
It limits the debate.
Limits the debate. Now, where it says limits the debate before Congress, is that itself not an infringement of the First Amendment? Is there not a constitutional question involved there?
Well, if there's not, there ought to be. I think, Dave, honestly, though, that should be, could be, but we've got much bigger constitutional issues under the statute that are so obviously inconsistent with the way the Constitution was intended and the way it's been interpreted. And this is just a great example of the slippery slope that, you expand the authority of the federal government a little bit, and it just expands a little more and expands a little more. And then they sell this stuff by saying, oh, it's just a great idea. How could you be against everybody having health insurance? Again, one thing I think it's not a constitutional issue, it's more of a cultural issue. We were a country founded upon people who wanted to be responsible for themselves. They did not want to be wards of the state. That is one of the key reasons for the greatness of this country. That's why we had a country that could stop the Nazis. And we are now all becoming serfs. It's kind of like the state's taking all this Medicaid money, and now they can't say no because they're too dependent on it. We're getting completely dependent, all of us are getting completely dependent upon the federal government taking care of all of our problems, instead of what Americans really are, which is people who want to take care of their own problems and want the government to get the hell out of the way. And that's what we got. That's the real problem, in my view, ladies and gentlemen.
So
we got to get back to being Americans.
Are you recording this? How come it's not going to be put on YouTube? Your facts are you don't hear that anywhere. This is a very small group in here. What do the liberalism do? What the liberal teams do? They have marketing. Where's the marketing here?
Well, on that note, as we're concluding, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. I hope you have found the program informative. And I'd like to explain to you very briefly. We are, NCICL is a 501c3 nonprofit, as is the Civitas Institute. And that means that donations to NCICL are tax deductible, as they are to Civitas. You can find more detailed information about us and an opportunity to donate online at ncicl.org. And Civitas, if you would.
Looking at it all day.
True. But I want you to understand that what we do is not just programming like this. This is more of a Civitas kind of event. What NCICL does is we try to educate officials and other attorneys about constitutional limitations on government. And when that doesn't work, we take them to court. So we've sued over the constitutionality of certificates of need, and we have sued over the constitutionality of crony capitalism. We are all too prepared to throw down and go to the courthouse. But that requires support, and it requires support of people like you. So I thank you in advance for taking the time to learn more about NCICL and considering the contribution. And thank you again. Thank you, Steve, Tom.